Morning, everybody.
For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Liana. I am founder and inspiring chief at Inspiration Space. And we are creating space today to talk about net zero. Yesterday was the start of COP27, where politicians, leaders, scientists, and lobbyists from all around the world are gathering in Sharm el Sheikh to talk about what we do to adapt and mitigate the consequences of climate change. The Earth is now beyond its projection of 1.5 degrees when it comes to the increase in Earth's temperature. And so now we've got some very crucial choices and decisions to make. What I would say is one thing that you don't hear in the headlines is hope. And having been in Anthropy, which is thought to be the UK's version of Davos, and hearing and having conversations with the people whose work I've seen out in the world that inspires me, and people who are at the forefront of having these conversations, there is hope. But we have to change. And as small businesses and entrepreneurs, we are in a very interesting position of power. Because we are so small, we can adapt faster. And I don't know if you know this, but services has a lighter carbon footprint than products. And the scope for collaboration and innovation and new types of business models that deliver a value to a triple bottom line, so the planet, people, and profit, is going to be so much easier for us. And so we're going to get the science, and we're going to get some new ideas, and we're going to come away with some hope. And if you're joining us in the Low Carbon Accelerator, we're going to take this inspiration, sprint you through to an action plan. By the end, you will have the documentation and the knowledge and the evidence and accreditation that you need to be able to work with companies that have signed up to sustainable procurement practices from central government for digital technology and services. So this means that if you are working with an organization that is signed up to that, you will be clean in their supply chain. It also means that you can go for opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have thought were possible, because it's a pass-fail criteria. And if the incumbent hasn't done this work yet, you will be ahead of the game. I'm really excited that we've got Adam Bastock here, the founder of Small 99. He has built the most incredible tool called Small 99 Hero. When I used it over the summer, I got through the accreditation and implementation in 48 hours, and it was fun. We're going to have a little demo of that as part of the Low Carbon Accelerator, but today we're going to play with the Net Zero Scorecard, which is going to give us a benchmark. So before we get started, do you want to pop into the chat or unmute yourself and just tell us, how far are you on a scale of 0 to 5, 5 being I am a net zero superstar and 0 being I still throw trash out my window, are you on the journey? 0 to 5.
I am currently probably a 1 or a 2. I'm a florist, by the way, and we're struggling very much as an industry to be good at all, but yeah, we're going to get there. So I reckon I'm a 1 or a 2, probably a 1.
Cool. Who else? A 0. I feel you. 2. Cool. And there's no shame or judgment. Don't worry, guys.
I feel like I waver, because I feel like on a daily basis I try and do things like I compost, I've got an electric bike, blah blah blah. My husband's in sustainability, but I did the World Wildlife Fund carbon footprint thing the other day, and I was really horrified because I do still take flights and I do have a normal car as well. So yeah, I kind of felt like I might have said I was quite high before, but now I'm wavering.
It's really interesting. It's a difficult one, I think. I mean, having an electric bike, I think, is a really key part. I'm a big fan of electric bikes. I don't even have one myself, but in terms of the stats, it shows such a shift away from from vehicle usage. So even having that electric bike will have shifted and probably reduced out your vehicle miles, your road miles quite a lot. And that's typically even in a average year's consumption of petrol is going to be higher than taking like 2 flights a year, depending on where you're going. So I think that kind of the small behaviour shift is really what's key here, because that has
I've only had it a week, but
okay.
and it's rained all week, and there's nowhere to park my bike where I live, but I'm working on it.
It'll be interesting to see if you do suddenly start like reducing your car miles down as a result of that. Probably more next year when it's spring rather than winter's a brave time to get an e-bike.
And this is a good time to introduce Adam. And before we get started, I'm going to ask him to tell us his sustainability journey. So Adam, tell us about yourself, because you're a digital marketing expert. You are on it with the SEO, and yet here you find yourself if we were going to use, entrepreneur tech crunch language, a climate tech founder.
Yeah, I always struggle with how to introduce myself because I do find climate tech founder a bit of a reach, but yeah. So my background is probably about 10 years ago, I started working in a lot with small business owners to help them understand digital marketing. So that was Shopify, Google Ads, SEO, Pinterest marketing, that whole thing of how do you take an e-commerce brand and really thrive online. In doing that, I found a lot of the problems there were the kind of big conferences were always aimed at really large corporations, and that small businesses were being potentially ignored a lot of the time from that conversation. And the advice they were given wasn't very practical. So what I did is move my entire freelance kind of business into giving really practical advice to small business owners on how to grow their SEO and how to grow their website through SEO. Because 90% of SEO technical information, small business owners do not need to know. There's about 10% which is really simple to implement and that will actually work and does work. It doesn't take, it's not as complex as a lot of agencies make it out to be, because then they charge you 10, 15 grand or whatever it is. Got a bit bored of that probably about 3 years ago, and suddenly started seeing that the sustainability thing was always there in the background, always an interest, and just saw the same challenge really in that a lot of the advice coming out around net zero or sustainability or carbon reduction was aimed at either corporates or academics. It was either incredibly large items where it's get your head of sustainability to do this. Well, small businesses don't have a head of sustainability. Or it was all really just impenetrable language that isn't very needed. So it's okay, I've got that kind of communication skill set from digital marketing. Let's just translate all the noise that's coming out from either whether it's a COP26, whether it's government advice, whether it's other kind of corporate advice, and really translate that into practical actions that you can start taking. And I think what Liana said at the start is so important around the reason why I started Small 99 was because small business owners can move incredibly quickly. And I'd seen that with SEO and selling packages, is that if I sent an email with a quote on it, quite often within 24 hours, I'd have that money in my bank account to start going with. That's the sort of speed that businesses work with that just agencies and large organizations don't fully understand or appreciate or harness. So really it's a case of, let's stop talking about net zero by 2050. Let's start talking about net zero in 6 months, because quite often that is actually a practical target for businesses if they've got the things they need to do and if they can just be told what to do. And that's where a lot of the advice that we're giving is really come from, is let's get people started quickly. How do I give you the information to take action in 10 minutes? So if I've only got 10 minutes with you, where can I get you started on that net zero journey? And I think things like e-bikes are something I bang about all the time. So that's the driving force behind Small 99. And just to give a bit of insight behind the name, 99% of the businesses registered in the UK are defined as small, so less than 49 employees. So it's really, how do we harness that mass majority of about 6 million companies? That's probably changed by now, but 5.5 to 6 million individuals throughout the UK who are all people like yourselves, and get them to take one step forward. Doesn't necessarily have to be the full net zero journey, but just that single first step, because the rest is then easy. I've just seen a question come in already, which is always good, so I'm just going to jump on that very quickly. Do software apps now have an energy efficiency rating? Sadly, not really. Digital footprints are really difficult to try and calculate and understand. There's a lot that's coming through, and I think that is an area that's improving. For example, we host Small 99 Hero on Google's cloud servers, and there's a report within that we get that is how much CO2 have we emitted through the usage. The answer is basically nothing. It's tiny because we don't have any users on it. But if we had 100,000 users a month, we'd have a report we could pull to say what the footprint of that was. But I think the benefit of digital emissions is that they're very easy to decarbonize. The more we get solar and wind turbines installed, the faster we'll start seeing that figure drop. So the main thing you can really do with software apps is just email them and ask them, is their hosting fully renewably powered? And I think Liana's had some kind of experience of that firsthand.
When I did my 48-hour sprint, and I used the Hero, when you do this, is you'll use the Hero, is that it had a template that said, email your software providers. And because we had already, just for our own auditing purposes, created a list of everything that we were using and what it was costing us financially, I just added a column for the sustainability, and I copy and pasted the template from the Hero tool, and I got the answer from almost 80%. And where I didn't get a reply, I was able to go onto their websites to pull the sustainability policies. And what I found very interesting is that as I was doing it, the change in myself was so fast. I started to get frustrated when I went to a website and I couldn't find the sustainability policy. It became an expectation, just like a privacy policy, just like a data policy. And this is really the core point of the low carbon accelerator. Make sure that you have that basic stuff in place. There are so many opportunities, and people are making these wholesale changes so that they can keep their supply chains clean. It becomes, we can't work with you if you don't have this. And you don't have 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks to pull together a credible, sustainable environmental policy. And if you're working in communications, you need to educate yourself on the science, because just like with data breaches, the fines for greenwashing are significant. And they're coming at brands fast. And if you are the one responsible for said messaging, so you have to educate yourself in the science so that you can understand what the discourse is around the conversation, what is true and what is false. What do you need to adapt to this new world? And then all of the inspiration and ideas and partners that really your head, heart, and hands can hold to go and build, because it's so exciting. It genuinely is really exciting. So let's kick off, okay? A key talking point at Anthropy was all around the new industrial revolution and using that inspiring language around it. And so this is all about your low carbon evolution, because we're going into this brave new world. And we're going to talk about why it matters, where to start, and how to get involved. I told you I'm Liana. I'm a venture catalyst and inspiring chief. I have a real passion for disruption and a challenging the status quo. And with sustainability and this idea of conscious capitalism, it really speaks to my sense of purpose and why I created Inspiration Space, which is to help people go beyond what they think is possible. This is a quote from Simon Kuznets, and he came up with what we now know as GDP, gross domestic product. And as he was reflecting back, he had said to himself, a question that I should have asked is, if you want more growth, you should specify more growth of what and for what. Because the challenge that we actually find ourselves in is what is called an extractive business model, instead of thinking about longevity. This idea of it is cheaper to replace a washing machine than it is to have one repaired. How Apple introduces a new iPhone every year alongside a new MacBook and this and that. It's sheen holes, it's subscription boxes. But there's another way of thinking about it, and it starts with challenging our obsession with endless growth. So you often see that hockey curve and it goes up. It's like you must just keep going up and up and up and up and up and up infinitely. But the reality is resource is finite. Our energy is finite, both what we take out of the ground, what we take from ourselves, all of it. And so this isn't the full picture. There's another way of thinking about it, and it's circular. If you haven't read the book, Donut Economics by Kate Rayworth, I highly recommend it. And as I was describing, you've got this linear economy here, right? You take, you make, you use, you waste. Then you've got a recycling economy where you take, you make, you try and recycle it, you use it again, but then ultimately it ends up in waste. But in a circular economy, it all just keeps moving around. And if you think about it, that's what a lot of us are doing already. It's free cycle, it's Facebook groups, it's Depop. And I will post a link in the Low Carbon Accelerator group to the Blink that you can access from a free playlist that we have through Blinkist. You can listen to it 15 minutes and then you can grab the book. It is so interesting. So what we're talking about is redesigning the economy so that it's circular, so that we measure other things besides this constant taking. I find it really interesting that in ancient Greece, the economy was valued based on how long goods stayed in circulation. That was the sign of a healthy economy. We want to go back to that. And so it's not just good for the planet, but it's good for your business as well. It is a way to make you more competitive when you make sustainability a priority. It also is great for innovation. Now, when we talk about sustainability, what we're actually saying is we want a balance between the environment, people, and profit. And we need to make it all equitable. It needs to be bearable. It needs to be viable. And when we think of this as people who live in the global north, what we're saying is we need to redistribute wealth into the global south, redistribute knowledge, innovation, opportunity, and do our part to cultivate a much more equitable, sustainable world, first and foremost by reducing our consumption. And so, yes, the saying is we are going to use less, right? When you think about your clothes, something that I love and I'm going to take with me is this idea of only buy something if you're prepared to wear it for the rest of your life. Because we want to consume less, we have to consume less. All of our cheap clothing that we wear is not only bad for water supply, it kills artisan industries because our charity clothes go back to Africa and Bangladesh. And instead of the artisans who have, long histories of creating sustainable textiles, they're wearing our cast offs. So there's this like triple impact to our consumption. So it's all about ensuring that we can all have a good life today and the planet is healthy for future generations. And this is how it's going to drive growth, because these are all jobs, these are all services that will fuel the economy. And I genuinely believe tip the power balance, because this is about more than money. So consumers are saying it, right? 70% of consumers say sustainability impacts on their purchasing decisions. Now, I think that there is an element of I'm giving you the right answer because I don't want to be judged. But also, I know that, I think about it. I do think about it. And I also weigh up the cost benefit. And I think, again, this is where that doing less really comes in, wasting less. It's great for brand equity. People feel good about buying from you. It's good for cost savings. Despite what headlines would have you to believe, sustainability can save you money. The language that's used around this is almost designed to make it feel so impossible. And it's just swapping and changing and finding new, different things to use. And that's why it's really great for innovation and talent. People that you can collaborate with, people that can work with you. I've met so many new people by going on this journey. Adam is one, it's just really reinvigorated my spirit when it comes to business, because the last 2 years have been really hard. And it's just like, oh my God, something else. But this just feels very purposeful, like when I first started. And I think that that is a good thing for your mental health. And when you're adding in this concept of sustainability, it's a way of keeping yourself accountable to your own business practices. Am I looking after myself? So all around, I can say this has been a win. And there's no net zero without micro SMEs. Inspiration Space, we've joined the Small 99 mission to bring 1 million SMEs to net zero by 2030, because our 2021 vision was all around establishing a pathway to get 50,000 people through our programs. Me and my love of two birds, one stone, I was like, right, Adam, put me down for 50,000 because it makes zero sense in today's world to have any company starting without this knowledge. We cannot afford for anyone to continue, let alone start, without carbon literacy, without understanding how to build a business that is balanced for people, profit, and purpose. It's conscious capitalism. All businesses have to start like Patagonia is today. And that's really cool because it levels everybody up. So that's why we're really gung-ho on this, because we were like, we're doing it anyways. And it's not within our value set to see something like this and have it go ignored. So think of it like a stamp at the amusement park. You must grab your sustainability stamp before you carry on the journey, because then from here on there, you can have all this fun and you don't have to think about it. But you got to just get your first stamp so you can crack on. And that's because small micro companies like ours emit 4.4 tons of CO2. We create 36% of total emissions. And interestingly, stats show that 44% of micro SMEs don't believe that they can make a difference. And alongside that, 68%, majority of us are worried about increasing costs. Now, something else that I find really interesting is that research from Meta shows that there's a gender gap in between knowledge of sustainability and net zero. And there's a racial divide. And when we think about opportunities and genuinely the amount of money that's being put into this, if we don't all start leveling up, the same thing is going to happen as happened in the last industrial revolution. White men will make the rules. Because if you can't have the conversation and you can't offer in solutions, and if you put your head in the sand, it's harder to grab a seat at the table. And we all want a seat at the table because this is a chance to make everything more equitable. So we have to stand up and be counted. And that's why I say the good news is that inspiration can save us. It's 4 simple steps. Now, this is how we run the low carbon accelerator. And this is the same framework that Small 99 is using in the Hero tool and all of the education that they have. And this is what I want you to think of going forward, is that learn the science so you can think different. Then do what you can to track, measure, calculate, and swap. Then redesign what you're doing. And if you're in the low carbon accelerator, this is when you'll complete your accreditation for the Carbon Literacy Trust. And then you're going to take action. You're going to share your plan with us, and then you're going to submit it. And that is how you will breathe new life into your business and do what you can to lead this next new normal. And I promise you, it's easier than you think, and it genuinely is fun. Okay, so this is all you've got to do, is to learn the science and think different. You're going to learn how to track, measure, calculate, and swap. You're going to redesign your business, which means you're just going to take out what's carbon intensive, add in things that either help you to track, measure, or save you money, or change the way that you work so that your carbon footprint reduces. And you're going to take action. I did it in 48 hours. And like I say, the Small 99 Hero tool genuinely makes it fun. So does anyone have any questions or thoughts before I hand over to Adam to teach us or take us through the basic introduction of net zero? Okay, so Adam, over to you.
Brilliant. Okay, so what is net zero? Net zero is the amount of emissions that your business is putting out, and then you're offsetting the remainder of that to achieve net zero. That's how you achieve it really quickly and really easily. But the most important thing with net zero compared to other measurements is you need to demonstrate a reduction in your emissions. You can't just go and buy a bunch of offsets and say that you're net zero. You have to have demonstrated some level of reductions in the amount of consumption of your carbon and your greenhouse gas emissions. That's another key point, is that net zero includes all of the greenhouse gases, including methane, etc., whereas a term like carbon neutral only relates to carbon dioxide. That's the 30-second pitch of net zero. Well, it's great having the Ask Tax style. Here's one I prepared earlier. I really like that. It's much easier than me repeating myself all the bloody time. Does that make sense to everybody in terms of the net zero versus carbon neutral element? Because that's really the key. That's one of the kind of the key differentiators. So I just want to clarify that everyone's happy with that.
If you were going to summarize it in one word, or rather one sentence, how would you in its most simplistic form?
Let's go with one word. I think action is really the key differentiator, is that carbon neutral, you don't need to take action in order to become accredited. Okay, so yeah, so asking for an example. So let's take someone like Next. So I think Next have verified themselves as kind of carbon neutral, essentially. What that means is that Next, as an organization, because they are so large, they can't take action very quickly. Therefore, they can't really net zero immediately. So what they've done instead is go, well, we've got £100,000. We are going to buy £100,000 of carbon credits. And that means that then those carbon credits offset the activities of Next, and then therefore they are carbon neutral. So in a graph term, you've kind of got the amount you're emitting is 100, and then the amount you're offsetting is also 100. So there are questions around those offsets, but they are under carbon neutrality, they are verified, and they are kind of accredited measurements of those carbon emissions. If they were net zero, they would have had to have reduced their emissions down by around 90%. So someone like Next, if they've got an emission of 100 tons or 100,000 tons, they would have to reduce that down to 10,000 tons in order to be net zero. That would mean things like electrifying their delivery fleet, looking at where their suppliers are coming from, taking all of their stores into kind of renewable energy territory and using solar panels and wind turbines, and then looking at how their staff are getting to work and going, well, actually, how are they providing electric vehicle charging or electric bike storage and everything like that. So net zero is a far more difficult term to achieve, and that's why it's far more important to aim for it, because it actually requires you to have done something. And that's really why we don't tend to talk about carbon neutrality, because I think as a small business, I mean, the stats that we'll just share there, a small business will have a footprint of, I think it was, what was it, 4.4 tons was the average. So for sake of ease, let's go for 10 tons and round it up. To offset 10 tons is not going to cost you that much money. Even if you're doing it within the UK, that's going to be less than 100 quid. And therefore you can achieve carbon neutral with not that much kind of financial incentive. To achieve net zero, you need to actually do stuff and start changing your model. In terms of who's measuring that, great question there. It really depends on the business. So quite often they will be using a verified partner. So that might be someone like, well, there's loads of people out there that are doing this now in terms of the measurement. So there's companies like Normative or Planet Mark or kind of Green Element or whoever. There's a lot of carbon measurement consultants out there now who are doing this and doing it to a certain standard, which is the greenhouse gas protocol standard, which I won't go into because it's quite boring.
I have a question. Sorry for that. Yeah. I was wondering, you did say that if you want to achieve net zero, you'd have to reduce it by 90%. Is that correct?
That's correct for large organizations. So that is the corporate target. For small businesses, in theory, it's also 90%. However, my personal take on it is that that's not necessarily going to be practical. Where I'm more interested is that you do as much as you can quickly, because as a small business owner, it's very realistic that you can probably reduce your emissions by like 50% within a year, but then that you might hit some roadblocks with things like suppliers or with renewable energy, because if you're renting a small shop unit, you don't have control necessarily over that energy usage, and therefore it's more important to do as much as you can rather than focus too much on the 90% element, because that is more of a requirement for large organizations to achieve by 2050. So that 90% reduction is over the next kind of 18, 28 years, can't do maths, 28 years for corporations. There is a gap in the market in terms of a more official definition of net zero for SMEs. That is due in the next year or so. For now, I'm sort of just not making it up, but using my intellect to kind of have an approved estimate of what it would look like, which I think is just do as much as you can, throw the kitchen sink out of it. I just saw another question as well from Emily. Do some businesses rely entirely on offsetting but go over and above their emissions to create a positive image? I think yes is the answer. So there's an organization called the Million Tree Pledge, which is a really good example of how to do this. And an example, which is a kind of collection of brands that are doing this, where they're planting 1 million trees. Let me just put the link into the chat. And then you've got some companies, so like our web hosting is done by Crystal. They've got a mission to plant 1 billion trees by 2030. So they are going above and beyond. They're throwing all the money they can at it to really have that positive image. There is a danger there that some businesses might be doing it kind of with malicious intent. Ultimately, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think with a lot of these programs, what's the worst case is that a business is spending too much money on restoring the environment. I'm sort of happy with that as an outcome, as long as they're also reducing down their impact. I think this is the key question really to ask any business is, what have you done on your net zero? It's not what are you planning to do, it's not what you're doing, what have you actually done? And that might be something small like using LEDs or getting an electric bike or having researched electric vehicles. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're in a position to do it. That's sort of fine. One company is a great example of this. They're a company based in Yorkshire. I can't remember the name of them. Great small company. They do a lot of training for land management. And that involves, unfortunately, cutting down a lot of trees, because trees die and they need kind of cutting back to leave room for other ones that are more healthy and stuff like that. So they do a lot of training on the Yorkshire Dales, kind of in the middle of winter, in the middle of nowhere, where they need to get 10 people out with chainsaws into this field to cut down a bunch of trees. Immediately not the most environmentally friendly kind of business, but they'd spent, I'd say, a good 10, 15, 20 hours researching all the different alternatives for, one, fuels usage for the chainsaws. So they were asking me whether electric chainsaws were better than kind of ethanol fuel chainsaws, and if they were better than petrol ones. And I was like, don't have a clue, probably battery ones, but there's a lot of questions there. And they'd also done a lot of stuff with kind of 4x4s, so looking to try and get these big Mitsubishi Hilux, Highlanders, or whatever they're called, because they are driving across peat bogs and they need to get into these remote locations, and there aren't any electric vehicles out there that do that at the minute. That it's not even if they're affordable or not, they just don't exist in terms of that kind of working horse type vehicle. And they were really concerned because, what do we say? We can't, we can't have a sustainability policy because we've not done things. And it's like, you've just spent 2 or 3 days looking into every single option. That in itself is a really key element of this, and that is action. That's you taking action on it. So just because you can't do something doesn't mean that you've not, done something. It just means that you've looked into it as much as possible. I'm really interested in, and this went into the design of the Hero platform, is that I'm more interested as to why a business hasn't done it than I am necessarily if they have done it, because that's really the key defining point of going, if you've not got an electric vehicle, is it because perhaps you're slightly misinformed and that they don't, you think they don't work, or think that there's a kind of understanding there, or is it because they are simply impractical for your solution? There's 2 very different outcomes around that in terms of how someone's approaching it, and therefore how you judge and represent that company. And this is the key thing, really, is that I think a lot of businesses we run quite a few workshops and we speak to a lot of small businesses. The biggest thing that we find is that they just aren't saying what they're doing, and that they're actually have done a lot more than they think they have. So I'm really interested to see if those numbers at the start, those kind of averages of 2s and 3s, might actually be a lot higher by the end of this session or by the end of the accelerator, because I think typically, you'll have probably naturally come across these things and started changing it. And that's sort of why we've built the scorecard. Anyway, bit of a ramble there.
And that's why it's so fun, because you are going through and you're taking this action in real time. Like I say, by the end of the 48 hours, I'd emailed all of our providers and had answers. I had integrated in the Spherix tool, and it's like a 3-click, and it went right into zero. And I was able then to see like this baseline of emissions. And so I was quickly able to create an offsetting plan. So our intention is to offset 100% of the emissions that we generated from 2018 to 2022, and then use a method called carbon sinking that you'll find in the carbon offsetting guide on Small 99 to then offset our future emissions up to 2024 using carbon sinking. And something that's really interesting that I've discovered is the idea of carbon credits that actually have a value that are coming out of Gabon, and how they've restored the rainforest. And for the first time ever, they've actually been able to put a quantifiable fiat value on the carbon. And so instead of it being a case of, we are going to offset by planting trees that don't exist, you'll be able to buy credits that are attached to actual land value that's been mapped out. And so it has an actual fiat value. And that's huge because we don't value land like that. And that's going to make the whole process a lot more transparent.
Perfect. Yeah. Just to answer last question that's coming around using solar panels, correct that you have reduced your energy usage. So solar panels, they reduce your usage of energy. They don't necessarily offset it or neutralize it. Idea being that if you're using 10,000 kilowatt hours of energy a year, you install a solar panel that produces 8,000 kilowatt hours a year. You've reduced your usage down to 2,000 kilowatt hours a year. It doesn't count as a carbon credit or any kind of carbon offsetting or anything like that. It's quite a common question we do encounter. Let's go on to measurement, which I think is a really good example of where that comes from. The amount of emissions that your business is putting out, and then you're offsetting the remainder of that to achieve net zero. That's how you achieve it really quickly and really easily. But the most important thing with net zero compared to other measurements is you need to demonstrate a reduction in your emissions. You can't just go and buy a bunch of offsets and say that you're net zero. You have to have demonstrated some level of reductions in the amount of consumption of your carbon and your greenhouse gas emissions. As another key point is that net zero includes all of the greenhouse gases, including methane, etc., whereas a term like carbon neutral only relates to carbon dioxide. That's the 30-second pitch of net zero. When it comes to actually measuring your carbon footprint, there are two broad ways of doing it. There is spend-based and there is activity-based. Spend-based is based on your financials, so looking at your business and going, well, actually, you're spending £10,000 a month on plastic and £5,000 a month on paper, £20,000 a month on fuel, etc., etc., and then they can roughly translate that into a carbon footprint, and then at the end of it, you do get a very rough score, well, not very rough, a reasonably accurate score that isn't necessarily 100% accurate, but it's good enough to get you started and really get you thinking about your carbon footprint and where it might lie. These tend to be cheaper and a bit quicker, and I think they're really useful in getting you thinking about it and providing it against metrics that you're already using, but it's not going to be completely accurate. The second way of doing it is by activity. And activity is far more accurate, but because of that is also far more detailed, and it does typically need someone to come into your business and go, look, what you're doing every day. We need to look at when the heating's going on, when it's going off, when people are turning kind of computer monitors on and off, how they're driving to work, which suppliers you're working with and what are they doing. And it's far more integrated and piecemeal, where it really is going over your entire business with a tooth comb to go, where are your emissions actually lying in the business? They both have the benefits and negatives. The activity-based method is going to take a lot longer, but it is more accurate. And equally, the spend-based method is not as accurate, but it is much quicker and might get you at least some of the easy and obvious pots of carbon emissions in your business identified very quickly, because things like fuel, you're quite good at these videos. So I think, I hope that makes sense to you. So as an example, Spherics, which was linked earlier, they are the spend-based method. An activity-based method might be where you do install solar panels and then measure out how much energy it's reducing down. And then there are figures available from the government, which then quite quickly get that idea up. So there's no right or wrong answer. And I think really different people are going to have different approaches and what they actually enjoy doing. Some people like digging around and playing around with the data. Some people absolutely hate it and just want to be told very quickly what their footprint is. So we use Spherics. So as an example on this, I was looking at our kind of train line, because I do a lot of travel, or have done in the last year, always by train. So within Spherics, I can see how much money I've spent with train line this year. I know it doesn't give me a summary, but kind of roughly about 300 quid this year with train line. and that's given me an estimate of around 140 kilos of CO2 equivalent as the footprint of that. So if that was EasyJet, it would suddenly, that would jump up, because it would know that EasyJet's got a higher CO2 per pound spent kind of footprint. I think a really key thing there is, it's very likely that any business is going to have 100% accuracy of their footprint immediately. And that 4.4 tons figure earlier, that's going to change probably quite a lot around what the average footprint is, because the more small businesses that start measuring, the more data we're going to have on what those footprints actually look like. And therefore that figure is going to go up or down accordingly. So I think the key thing here is it is a journey, and starting is the important bit, because the more data we get, the more accurate these tools are going to become, and the more the more the problem solves itself, essentially. I think in terms of, if you did want an easy place to start measuring, I would either start with your energy bills and looking at that, or I would start with travel and just either measure, excuse me, either measure the kind of the annual emissions from your travel, or just pick one single journey and work that out and go, okay, me driving to the office once per week is what emissions is that? And then just start from there, because that'll get you used to the process, because it is fairly easy once you know not how to do it, because it is just multiplication, but once you know where to find the data, I think that's more the key thing, is once you know where that data sits. Yeah, a really good question, Emily. The lines are very hard to define, essentially. So in Spherix, the tool that I use, I've put all of my domestic usage as business usage, purely because I work a lot from home and I can't really be asked defining the figures there. So I just chuck it all in and go, it's probably over reporting it. That's fine. According to Spherix, my footprint's about 7 tons for small 99, which is probably a little bit high, but not by that much. There is a working from home metric now that, as of 2022, the government have just released. I think it's around 3 kilos per hour. No, not 3 kilos, 0.3. So 300 grams per hour of home usage, something like that. So you could always use that to estimate it up, and that includes kind of energy and any equipment and stuff. So that's the very rough one, but defining it more than that can be very hard for a kind of solo business. Ultimately, I wouldn't get too caught up on it being 100% accurate and just go, roughly what is it? Because it's always going to be impossible, because do you start including the lunches you have and how much meat you might eat for lunch as part of your footprint for work usage? And it's really difficult to know that unless you're going to an office, and then it's clearly defined. Cool.
What I also like about this is the idea that we are building the technology of the future. So I like to sign up for a lot of trials and things in this space, because we have to feed it with data. So it's almost like we've got I feel like that's like an additional contribution to the cause, is by using new tools and feeding it with data for behavior, for people that are trying to measure something that's currently not being measured. It's just going to accelerate the kinds of innovation and tools and things that are available. And it's another way of helping a small business, because technology is ubiquitous, and so whilst our small businesses of the now are creating digital products, they're not Facebook. And so it's another way of supporting small businesses just like ours, who are using their skills to create new solutions. So over to Adam again, who's going to talk to us about how net zero helps us get more customers.
The second business opportunity of net zero really is around changing consumer behavior. And there's a load of articles out there that all go on about how people are willing to spend more money on ethically or environmentally friendly products. I think that's been done to death. I'm not too interested in that. I think it's true. And I think most people already know that. The difficulty there is really communication. Businesses aren't communicating well enough at the minute. So just go out there, be transparent, be honest about what you're doing, and just talk to your customers about what you are or not doing around net zero. That translates more interestingly into the business to business sector, I think, where if you are a large company who is working on a net zero target and you're looking at your supply chain going, well, actually, we need to meet these deadlines by 2030, but we're looking at our supply chain and only 2 of our suppliers out of 100 of them have actually got commitments to net zero. Maybe we need to start looking at other suppliers and start reducing down who we're working with to make sure that they are also on this journey. If you're in a room for like a procurement contract or any public sector work, that's going to start coming in fairly soon, and certainly large companies as well. They're going to start really wanting you to have a business, a clear business commitment to net zero and reducing your footprint down, because they are not going to want to work with a company that is increasing their emissions. There's no reason why they would want someone. Why would they work with a supplier who's making their life more difficult? If you can demonstrate quite clearly to these companies that you're making their lives much easier, that's going to win you more business as well. So this probably is quite early days for this in B2B sector. We're not seeing a huge amount of it at the minute, but I'd say the next year, certainly around COP26, companies are going to start increase as they set more net zero targets. They're increasingly going to want to see more commitments from their supply chain as well. So get yourself prepared and get ready for this. Yeah, just very quickly, that video is probably out of date. We're now seeing that pressure come through. I think the prediction of that video was probably almost too slow in that we've seen that come through this year, and that's going to be ramping up next year. And I think regardless of what happens at COP27, that is going to happen. And regardless of what happens with the government, that is going to happen. I spoke to the head of Scottish Engineering. So they're an organisation that deals with kind of every engineering company in Scotland, essentially. They've started having what they class as tier 4 businesses. So businesses that are on the smaller end of the scale, they're still quite large, but may have between 50 and 100 employees. They're now panicking and coming to them and saying, we need a net zero strategy and an environmental policy in place now because suppliers are demanding it and we can't win any more work without it. So again, that's probably slightly bigger organizations than yourselves, but that's happened in about 6 months. Within 18 months, we're going to start seeing this. And I think there's another element to this around any grants that you go for or any public funding, or to a certain extent, even bank loans. I know West are starting to look at this, where they are having requirements that if you're going for a loan or you're going for a bid with the council, you're going to need an environmental strategy in place and a clear sustainability policy of what you've done and not done, and a roadmap to net zero before you can even open that conversation. The cat's out the bag, really. It's not even being driven by a policy thing, because while central government might not be leading on it, councils are, organizations are, and that's really hitting everybody in a much more kind of cascade waterfall way than I think people are predicting.
And something else that you can bear in mind is that this is how you can win new business. Because once you're prepared, helping your customers to prepare is a revenue stream. Being able to speak confidently about this is how you can create a new product or service. This can get you the ear of someone in procurement who otherwise wouldn't have looked at your business. And it's just like GDPR. That's the best way to describe it. If you remember how all of a sudden one day every small business was like, I need a data protection policy. And there were people just making millions helping solve that problem. This is almost like in Back to the Future with Biff and the playbook. We get to go back in time and take advantage of that because we've seen it done before. Because she who gets there first gets the gold and gets to make the rules. It won't be like this forever.
Yep. I think this
It's
is
like that now.
I think this is the biggest benefit around climate change as a crisis. And I say that with some sort of kind of irony. It's the biggest one we've ever faced, but it's the most predictable and it's the most preventable. We know exactly what we need to do to stop climate change. There's a roadmap, there's roadmaps everywhere. We just need to do it. And therefore the people who are actually doing it are the ones that are going to lead. So it's not something we have to invent. So it's not like at the start of the Industrial Revolution where you had to try and work out how a steam train worked. You know, we've got the technology, we just need to start using it. And I think that's the really key difference here is that, just kind of need to get on with it.
Okay, and the next one in our box is will reducing our emissions make a difference? I was shocked to discover that 44% of micro-SMEs basically don't think what they do or what we do will make a difference. And I've got to tell you, it's not true. It will. But let's hear it from Adam.
We don't have time to faff around here. We need to get on and just make these reductions. Yes, there is a question here that small businesses the big businesses, do have more of a responsibility here and should be doing more. And yes, the government should be doing more. But I think that's going to be the case for the next 2 to 3 decades. there's always more that we should be doing and could be doing. And the point is, if you're a small business and you're not doing enough, then you could and should be doing more. And you're in a position where you can move far quicker than bigger companies can. The reason why Small 99 has got a 1 million by 2025 net zero pledge is because small businesses can move quickly. They can make these decisions and make these changes very quickly and offset accordingly. And therefore, they can have a big impact once that cohort comes together. There's 5.9 million businesses in the UK that have less than 9 employees that are defined as a micro business or a small business. That's even if 1 ton reduction from all those companies is 6 million tons of CO2 saved per year. That's a huge amount. Yes, big companies need to be doing more, and yes, they are part of that. But you have to also remember that a lot of the small businesses in the UK are part of those big companies' emissions. If you look at someone like Starbucks, and I think Lidl and H&M, I think they did their supply chain, their scope emissions recently, their carbon footprint emissions, and 95% of their emissions were in their scope 3. Now, their scope 3 is their supply chain, essentially. It is the businesses that are supplying them with goods and services from around the world. You're probably in that supply chain somewhere. This is a web, this is a chain. And the more that you can reduce your emissions down, the more that you're reducing the other companies in your chain, both like above and below, what you're doing. This is where the scope 3 emissions are really powerful and really important to use, because what you do does have an impact on everyone else in that chain. You're part of an economy, you're part of a web, you have relationships with everyone else, and therefore you making reductions is going to make a huge difference. And within small businesses, there are a lot of them in the UK, and if everyone was doing that, we'd see this problem really start changing very, very quickly. So will you making a change make a difference? Absolutely. And you have more power over the bigger businesses than maybe you realize. Just one very small comment on that kind of power element. One thing we're starting to see, and I probably have learned since that video was recorded as well, is that councils typically they want to take action, but they're quite scared. There's a lot of what's the word? Not necessarily scared, isn't the right word, but they're cautious. And they really need to hear from small businesses to say, actually, we want this to happen, we support this, and to build that confidence up within the councils to make those slightly bolder decisions. And I think as business owners, you've got far more influence and input there than you do as an individual. And I think that's a really important thing to be using that not enough people are. So yeah, same with chambers of commerce as well. Typically they aren't recommending the lower carbon ambitious elements because they think that people don't want it, when in fact most people do.
Now, shall we talk about the emissions? Because if you've never heard of scope 1, 2, or 3 emissions, it might be a good time to introduce that. Then I'm going to just pull this article up as a screen share because it's a key bit of information.
Yeah, so scope, here you can see a screenshot actually from Spheric. Scopes 1, 2, and 3. The scopes 1, 2, and 3 comes from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So that's the official guidance that pretty much everybody is using. And this is language that you're going to come across more and more as you progress through this. Very informally, scope 1 is your vehicle and gas emissions. Scope 2 is your energy emissions, so your electricity, essentially. Scope 3 is everything that you buy, sell, and throw away. So to go into that in more detail, scope 1 emissions would include any direct emissions that your business is creating. So every time you turn the boiler on and every time you turn the ignition in your car on, if it's for business and if the business owns it, in theory, but I won't get to that, then that's a scope 1 emission. Scope 2 emissions is basically your electricity usage. It does include some other elements of that if you're in a very specific industry, but for most people, it's just electricity. And that's purchased. So if you're purchasing electricity, I think the other things it includes are if you're purchasing district heating and heat networks, but that's quite rare in the UK. So that's scope 2 in a more niche way. Anyway, scope 3 emissions are then everything else. So there's 15 different subcategories of scope 3. That includes things like business travel, your pensions, where your investments are. It includes how your staff get to work. It will also include, or to a certain extent, how your customers are getting to you. So if you're running a campsite, for example, we did an audit recently where 25 tons of their emissions were just coming from their customers driving to the campsite or back. It will include the emissions generated from anything you're throwing away. So if paper's going into landfill versus if it's being recycled. It will also include the kind of where you're buying that paper from. Is that coming from your suppliers, et cetera, et cetera. So scope 3 is really the biggest one to tackle. And that goes for everybody. Like, this is a really big issue for big kind of corporate suppliers, where them trying to grapple with where their emissions are coming from. They're having a really difficult time. And that is why we're starting to see the requirements pushed down onto smaller businesses, because if you're a HR company supplying Tesco's, one of the bakeries that supply Tesco's with their footprint, Tesco's is going to go to that bakery and say, we need your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions so that we can calculate our scope 3 emissions. That bakery is then going to start that process and turn around to that HR consultant and go, we need your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions because we need to calculate our scope 3 emissions. Then that HR company is going to turn around to the freelancers that they're using and go, hey, we're trying to work out our scope 1, 2, 3 emissions to win this contract. What are your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions? So this is how quickly the cascade is happening, is that the legal frameworks that are put in place to put pressure on those corporates cascade down very quickly. So even if you're not, this is what I meant by the tier 4 really, with Scottish Engineering, is it's not the companies that are maybe supplying BP, it's the companies that are building parts that are helping supply BP. And it's that niche business that think they're not, it's not going to affect them yet, because we're not turning over £36 million a year. We don't need to reference anything. But if you're only 2 steps away from a business that is, you're going to start to need doing it. Does that make sense? It's a lot to take in, and it is quite complicated. Scope 1, 2, 3, and yeah. So scope, any waste management is in scope 3. Recycling will reduce it down. So for example, if you take a piece of cardboard and put it into landfill, it generates a lot more emissions as it breaks down than if it goes into the recycling stream. The reason for that is because as paper breaks down, it releases methane. Methane being one of the kind of worst greenhouse gases, and therefore it's got a much higher carbon footprint than if you capture that or even if you burn it, it doesn't release as much methane. So I'm not saying start, setting bonfires for all of your cardboard rather than recycling it, but just make sure that it's going into segregated streams and doing that. And then the main thing really is reduce down the amount of waste you're creating in the first place. So really looking at your waste and going, well, of this cardboard that we're recycling, 80% of that is coming from the suppliers who are sending us unnecessary amounts of packaging when we order a pallet of goods to sell. That's when you start engaging with suppliers and go, right, can you start sending us less unnecessary packaging? And then, you want to start tracking your emissions over time and go, we're actually throwing away 2 tons of cardboard a month. Let's get that down to a ton of cardboard a month, whatever it might be. Bit of a tangent.
Love it. Okay. And then before we open up the floor for discussion, how do we take action? Where do we start?
This really is a journey. It's going to take you a couple of years. Some people are going to achieve it really quickly. Other people are going to have more complex businesses and it's going to take them longer. That's fine. In terms of where you need to start, I think the first thing is change your mindset. Really start looking at your business, and at every opportunity and every decision you'll make, start thinking of the carbon impact of that decision. So if you're buying new pieces of paper, one, think, do I actually need to be, why do I need this paper? Can we reduce the amount we're printing and the amount we're including in our delivery slips or wherever it's going? And then 2, can we buy this from a net zero supplier as well? So as soon as you start working with other companies who are on their journey to net zero, it's going to be far easier for you to also achieve it, just because you're both working in the same direction. So I think when it comes to starting, the obvious one is change your renewable energy supplier. But then after that, I think it's really important just to change the way that you think and approach these things and go, do I actually need this? Why do I need it? And also, can I purchase this from someone who is more sustainable? That's where I get started. The rest of it is very much more complicated, and there'll be more videos on that soon. One of the biggest challenges that business owners face in regards to net zero and reducing their emissions down is communication. How do you communicate effectively with customers on your environmental and your sustainability, actions? This often gets overcomplicated, I think, and really it is very simple. 1, be honest, be transparent, and have a single page on your website where you include all this information. It's as simple as that. It doesn't need to be a legal framework document. It doesn't need to be binding to any particular agreements. You just need to say what you're doing and what you're not doing. So what I'd really encourage you all to do is have a page on your website that is your sustainability or your environmental policy page. It's just a fairly open, informal page where you openly discuss with your customers what you are doing, what you're not doing, and what you're finding really challenging, because a lot of this stuff is difficult and you can't just instantly swap your entire diesel fleet of transit vans to electric because of the costs. Customers will understand that and they appreciate that because they're probably in a similar position themselves in terms of the more expensive alternatives. but it's important that you just take that information and you actually just communicate it with your customers and say that. Certainly if you're in the B2B space and you're working with other companies or public sector, it's even more important to have these policies out there. Maybe they will have some slightly more legal framework requirements, but even then, I see so many companies that they're doing good stuff, but they're not telling me about it. They don't say anything on the website. They don't just say, look, we're planting loads of trees, we're trying to reduce as much plastic from our business as possible, but it's really difficult for these reasons. So just be honest and transparent. It's as simple as that.
Okay. So we have the net zero scorecard that we can all take. I'll post a link in the chat. Adam, do you want to explain the scorecard and how it relates to us getting started and how we're going to be working with your tools during the low carbon accelerator?
Yeah, perfect. So the net zero scorecard is really answering that question of where do you start? The reason why I think, as we've just discovered, the scopes 1, 2, 3 language is very complex, and to be honest with you, it's kind of a little bit unnecessary a lot of the time. You don't need to know the details of it. So how do you actually get started with some simple ways to some simple ideas to like analyze your business and understand the different buckets of emissions within your company? And that's why we created the scorecard. So you go through it, you'll answer some questions. Some of them won't be relevant to you. That's absolutely fine. There should be not NA boxes for it where applicable. We've got 2 skill cards, one for professional services and one for retail and e-commerce. So if you sell online or you've got a shop, so Hannah, I was thinking that the retail one will be perfect for you. If you're a professional service worker from home, then do that one. And we'll then group your emissions into these 5 different buckets, which tends to be energy, transport, kind of supply chain, any kind of consumables you're having, and then appliances and furniture, because that can be quite a big one if you are using a lot of energy through like air conditioning or something. So once you go through that, you'll get a very rough estimate of what where your emissions sit within your business. Now, one caveat here, it's not going to measure your footprint exactly in terms of tons of CO2e. We are working on that. It's really difficult to do, and the tool's not quite good enough for that yet. So bear that in mind, but it will give you a rough idea of where to focus your efforts. The idea being then, so like in the little graphic there, you can see the energy section.
Shall we go through it?
Yeah, can do.
And then we can explain, because in case some of the language feels foreign, or you're like, I don't even know what that means. We'll go through the retail and professional services one. Okay, so.
Yeah, so fairly self-explanatory. If you're aware of energy suppliers, then great. If you're not, then maybe that's something you need to be aware of and start looking into from a business point of view. So if we click on, it's none of these, it's not logic-based, so you'll always see the same questions. And then, so have you switched to a renewable energy supplier? Yes or no? If you have, great. Is your website hosted on renewable energy? So we mentioned earlier Crystal and the challenges of engaging with the different service providers you might have there. So either yes, no, or you don't know. Do you schedule your heating? And that can be either domestic or in the office. Are you using LEDs? Yes or no? Or some. That's good. Have you kind of explored the ability to insulate your premises, including grants? Of which there are some, but it's incredibly fragmented. So we'll pick up funding at a separate time because it's a big topic. Do you keep track of your monthly energy consumption? It's a really key one in terms of tracking and understanding where you're reducing your elements down. And then, energy devices using smart meters. How often do you walk or cycle to meetings? So this is a sliding scale where you can put never or every day. What would you typically use instead of walking? If you're not doing that, then cars, driving devices. Do you use electric vehicle? Do you offer EV charging in your premises? Which is a really big one for even if you don't have a car, your customers might. Do you source your products locally? So sustainable transportation for your local deliveries. So this is a bit more of a niche one, but electric cargo bikes are really good for local deliveries, or you might use an electric van. So for example, there's a greengrocer near us that does all their deliveries in a little yellow electric van, which seems to suit them fine, much cheaper to run. And if not, for your national deliveries, who are you using for your kind of those deliveries? Is it Amazon, which is running diesel vans all over the place, or is it a smaller kind of more boutique company that might be a bit better. Norris, Kirsty, see you soon. How often do you use reusable eco-friendly products? Again, sliding scale there. Again, so this is linking back to energy and really understanding how much energy individual devices might be using. Like, are you using smart plugs to track your coffee machine and how much energy it uses, and have you really kind of audited your business in that sense? Typically, the answer is no. Efficiency ratings on any new appliances that you're using. So do you have a really old fridge which is sat there and using loads of energy, or have you upgraded it to a newer one with a better efficiency rating? Secondhand furniture, really big one. This, a lot of people don't seem to use secondhand furniture in their offices when there's no reason not to, like the desk that this is sat on. I've used it for about 10 years now. It's perfectly fine. It is a desk, it doesn't need to be new.
I have a Herman Miller chair that I got for 450 pounds. An office was getting rid of all their stuff because I guess they decided not to go back, and these things are $1,000.
Yeah, it's the same. I got refurbished about 8 years ago from my first SEO kind of freelance project, and it's seen better days, but you don't need to buy new all the time. Checking the environmental policy of suppliers. Again, this is something we discussed quite a bit earlier, but really vital you have an understanding of where your impact might be sitting within your supply chain, and that kind of scope 3 element that we discussed. Yes, Emily, I actually bought 2 monitors from Back Market recently for kind of our interns. It's been really useful. Potential sustainability suppliers. Yes, have you looked into those? So people like Back Market, are you using people like Back Market and looking into those alternatives? And then again, have you done anything about it? Quite often people have. Have you changed digital marketing suppliers to more sustainable ones? So this is things like Crystal or web hosting, or even things like MailChimp, and looking for alternatives there where they might not have that level of ambition for net zero that other platforms might do. Quite a difficult one to tackle.
Something that I found really interesting is this growing market for sustainable digital marketers.
Yeah,
I'm seeing it more and more, and it's like a total USP. There were whole agencies at Anthropy, and that was their specialism.
It's a huge thing. Because you met Maria, didn't you, Salil?
Yeah.
Which is all that comes to mind. But there's a lot out there where it's just having that understanding. Because again, if you're a supplier who relies heavily on digital marketing, and you're spending £10,000 a month with a digital marketing provider, you're going to need a net zero aligned supplier, because otherwise that's a big part of your footprint.
We signed up to the Good Business Charter, and the team from, what it's called?
Oh, Green Pixie?
Green Pixies, yes. They were talking about digital marketing and making it more sustainable. And what I loved about it is that it was, at the core of it, was about doing less. So creating fewer reels, creating fewer posts, like literally creating less content and prefacing text over photo and video because of the impact on your carbon footprint. And it was just, this is the perfect excuse to just simplify and even go to offline practices where it might be even easier to track, like direct mail.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting thing, going back to, especially with a lot of the cookie stuff that's coming in, where digital tracking is getting less easy. It's actually quite a bit easier to quantify the carbon footprint, but also the impact of physical media. So I'm seeing that kind of resurge a little bit with e-commerce brands.
Very interesting. And QR codes, man, they save the day. I've got so many ideas on direct marketing using QR codes.
Yeah. Somebody kind of really saved QR codes.
Yeah.
So waste management. Waste management is quite a complex one, and it's whether you work with a waste management company there. Financial services, again, a really big one. So where's your pension sat? Are you investing fully in BP and Shell, or are you actually investing in alternatives that might be greener, like Orsted or whoever? Keeping track of consumables. I think this is really, again, an awareness piece of, are you actually measuring what you're consuming? Because it might be that you're not, and that while you're using paper, great, paper still has a carbon footprint. Are you reducing it down? Are you aware of how much you're consuming? Where are you on that journey? And it might be they don't use that many anyway. So why using recycled paper versus, pure bleached virgin paper or vellum maybe. Yes, I'm reducing it actively. Carbon offsetting. Surprising. I was really surprised by this. How many people come through and aren't doing carbon offsetting, but they're using Small 99. Yeah, a lot of ecology with what's going on.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I suspect that a lot of the sort of big suppliers that we're all using in this group are probably, there's a lot of overlap, like Liana mentioned Xero or Squarespace or MailChimp. And I guess my question is, before I go off and email all of those companies, is there actually a place where market leaders are already ranked by somebody who knows their onions, so that basically we can all save a bit of time, be like, oh, Squarespace are actually terrible, I don't need to spend hours researching that, and here are some alternatives?
So we do have a digital sustainability series for this very reason, which I'll find out and click in the chat. It's probably a little bit outdated as well, because it's probably written about a year ago, so it might not be the most up to date, but it was surprising people like Shopify how little information they had. I did check them earlier, they do have stuff. So yeah, give me 2 minutes and I'll find that out for you.
Emily, that's a really good idea. I can tell you Canvas gets a gold star. Google is doing what they can. Amazon is on the road. Active Campaign as an email provider, they're doing good. And who else do I know? Zoom is on the road. Butter, they use Google for their hosting, so that is 100% renewable. But yeah, I'll pull all that together because that is a great idea to have it all in one place.
Thanks, both.
Now the environmental policy.
Yeah, so yes or no on this one, really simple. Like, are you actually basically communicating your answers? And then finally, how many employees do you have? Because that just helps us track who we're getting, basically.
And then you put your name in.
Yeah, sadly you do have to hand over your email address to see the thing. But the reason for that is because you do get kind of recommendations and reductions in an email series after that on how to reduce it and some tips there. So quite quickly, you can see here, okay, your score is 55%. So if we scroll down a little bit, we then break that down into different areas. And you can also see the scopes 1, 2, and 3, where we've tried to align it a little bit as to where your footprint is. So transport here, really bad. Lots of car driving, not much walking, all done in a petrol car is going to really drive that up. But things like appliances, where it's buying secondhand, you've scored much higher on that as well. So really just a very quick, the average submission time for this is 3 minutes, just to share that with you. So a really quick idea of just a way to sketch out where your footprints probably are, so that you can start focusing your efforts and going, well, actually, let's focus more on our transport and where we can start with reductions there, because it's quite likely that's where our higher footprint is. As mentioned, that's not necessarily, if you then go and measure your footprint, it might look different to this. That's the idea, is to get started, not to solve it all in one go within 3 minutes. We are working on that. So yeah, hopefully next year we're going to start launching a new scorecard that's going to be a bit more informative.
That is awesome. So as you can see, there's a lot to take in, but it's not as unachievable as maybe you might think. So thanks to Adam. If you are joining us on the Low Carbon Accelerator, we have an onboarding session this Thursday where we'll get you all set up in the platform if you're not already. And then the first of 2 carbon literacy boot camps starts on the 17th. That is a quick fire way of gaining the knowledge that you need to really understand the difference between methane and ethanol, the core things that you can be doing right now to reduce your footprint, the importance of collective action, what the science is telling us about the threats and the risks of climate change and this climate crisis. And then we spend the second half of the program implementing the HERO tool so that you're actually creating and taking action along the way. If you're a member of Inspiration Space, if you're not, do join us. Membership to the community is free by way of energy exchange. As I said, no business should be starting or growing without this as a foundation.